Unknown reference to the mythical Atlantis by Theophrastos, a passage from Emilianos, who rescued an unknown reference to the mythical Atlantis of Theophrastos, a contemporary of Alexander the Great. We know that Alexander the Great was, of course, not a mythical person, but he was the person that basically put an end to the Persian Empire about 330 BC. It's about a dialogue between Midas and Silenus. I've kept the style of the text as I read it in the book, I Ekpantake Apocalypsiones by Antonius Callas, and the description is as follows. Theopompus narrates a conversation between Midas, the Phrygian, and Silenus. Silenus is the son of a nymph, god but invisible in the nature of human being, since he was also immortal. Many others among others were held, but the following were the most important of what Silenus said in his superior wisdom to Midas. So he said that Europe, Asia, and Africa are islands in comparison to Epirus. They existed in ancient times beyond the known world. So immense was the size of it. This continent was the last one which raised giant animals on it, and the people lived on it were twice the size of the people of the time when the story took place. In other words, they were giants. Now, in the end of their life was not as long as we live, but twice as long. In other words, they had longevity, and they were giants. And there were many cities on it, and various lives of the seers, and their laws were contrary to our own. And their cities were very rich, and one of those cities had a population of over 1 million. Gold and clay were nevertheless found in great quantity. Then Elianos narrates that there was a constant war, mainly between the two cities, one which was called Makimos and the other Evsevis. Therefore the pious lived in peace and deep wealth, receiving the fruits of the earth without plows and laborers, because to them everything flows unsparingly and unreservedly. Having lived all their lives healthy and immune, they died laughing and suffering exceedingly. They were undoubtedly so righteous that even the gods did not feel the need to study with them, and the inhabitants of the city of Mahimos were also armed, constantly fighting and enslaving their enemies. Thus this city is the ruler of many nations. They rarely die of disease because most succumb during wars. Such was the abundance of gold and silver compared to them that they had a lesser value than them, or as much as iron has today. That's how much gold and silver they had. Now, they once attempted to cross into our country, our own country, and having sailed the ocean with an infinite number of troops, they reached the Hyperborea. Realizing the misery in which we live, however, they disdained to proceed further. This is from Theophrastos, 372 BC to about 5 BC, for 287 BC. He was a philosopher of antiquity. He is considered a continuation of the work of Aristotle, whom he succeeded as director of the Peripatetic School. We get most of the information about Theophrastos' life from Diogenes, author of the Lives of the Philosophers. Theophrastos was born in 372 BC in Erissos, Lesbos. His father was the rich merchant Melantus. The name can also be seen on the base of the bust in the image on there. And his real name was Tirtamos. Initially, he received his first lessons near Leucippus, while later he left the city of Erissos to move to Athens, Greece, where he began to study philosophy as a student of Plato. After the death of his teacher in 347 BC, he followed Aristotle. Now remember, Aristotle was also the teacher of Alexander the Great. So he followed Aristotle, who distinguished his erudition and intelligence, named him first Euphrastos and later Theophrastos. This esteem that Aristotle had in Theophrastos was so proven by the fact that when in 323 BC, Aristotle was accused of impiety and forced to flee to Chalkida, northern Greece, he donated his library to Theophrastos, and entrusted him with the management of the itinerant school. Theophrastos remained as the head of the school for 25 years, and during this time he taught and also left many writings. During this period, it's still said that the students of the school exceeded 2,000, and among them were Menandros, the kings of Macedonia, Philip, and Cassandros, as well as the king of Egypt, Ptolemy I. Theophrastos was never actively involved in politics, but devoted himself entirely to science and philosophy. He died about 287 BC, and until the end of his life he taught and worked. Theophrastos' work is particularly rich, as it's estimated that he wrote a total of about 240 works, which deal with a multitude of topics around ethics, logic, rhetoric, the history of the sciences or metaphysics, and mainly botany and zoology. Today, mainly fragments of his work are preserved, but also some complete texts such as On the Plants of History, 9 books, On the Causes of Plants, 6 books, as well as his most famous work, Characters. The first 2 works are probably the first works in the field of botany in an era of antiquity and until the Middle Ages. An important legacy of his botany is that today the endemic palm of southern Greece has been baptized in his honor as Phoenix Theophrasti, as he was the one who first and strongly mentioned the existence of this plant in the area of Greece in his work. So the important thing is that he basically refers to Atlantis, that they had giants that were about twice the size of a regular human, and that they had longevity, and they had an abundance of gold and silver. And they came from across the Atlantic. Please leave your comments. Thank you for your support. I've translated this for you from a Greek article. Thank you. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box.